Okay, so today's video is on the composition technique in photography called framing. So students will be able to, the objective of this lesson is to define the technique of framing, analyze how two different methods of framing are used to draw attention to the main subject, and recognize some creative tools that we may have to help us use framing in our own photography. So exactly what is framing in photography? Framing is defined as a compositional technique where you draw attention to your main subject or frame your subject by photographing that subject inside part of your setting. So here we have an example of a girl. She is clearly the main subject, and we know that because she is framed inside of the doorway. The doorway acts as the frame. Here's another example of some people on a train. You can tell that the windows create the frame. All right, so the two windows on the train create the frame, and we know that they are the main subject, the people inside of the windows. One might argue that the person whose face we can clearly see is really the main subject, while the others are sort of standing in shadow. But I think that we could say that the people are the main subjects of this. Another example would be the house. The house is the main subject, and the frame is the area between the fence posts and the chain. That loop of the chain link becomes the frame. So, exactly why do photographers use framing? Well, there are a number of reasons, but the most important reason is to attract the viewer's eye to the main subject. That's the number one goal of framing. Framing can also provide the context for the photo. It can kind of give the viewer a sense of the person or place where the photograph was taken. And it can also create an illusion of depth or layers in the photograph. This photograph sort of gives you the feeling that you're sitting in a Japanese villa looking out into a garden. So there's some layers there. The frame is clearly the doorway entry. So, really, framing can be done in two ways. Number one is to shoot through something, such as this example. The children are the main subject, and the photographer is shooting through the parents. The other way is to place your subject inside of something. So in this case, the person is placed inside of that garage overhead door area. Here's another example of shooting through a railing, shooting through something, and then placing inside of something. In this case, it's a doorway. Shooting through a basketball hoop, placed inside of a mirror. It's worthy to note that mirrors can actually be very effective tools when done creatively to help photographers frame their main subjects. Here's another example. That's a really cool one. And then this is a very creative example of using a mirror to help frame. In fact, there are many tools that may be used at our disposal to help us frame our subjects. So when you find a subject that you want to photograph, take a step back to look at your surroundings. Ask yourself, how can I incorporate my location to really draw attention to my subject? All right, so let's get those creative juices flowing, shall we? Here are some examples of some creative tools that we may have at our disposal to help us use framing in our own photography. Architectural framing, such as doors, windows, and arches. Environmental elements like trees and other vegetation. Using shapes, using light and shadows, using body parts or people, really, honestly, just about anything. Some examples of architectural framing include using windows, doorways, urban architectural features, archways, a stairwell, and even a subway. Environmental possibilities could include using trees, rock formations, if you're lucky enough to have that around your setting, and vegetation. Here are a few examples of using shapes in an urban setting. Finding shapes in your surroundings and using them to help you frame can be very effective. Let's take a look at a few examples of using light and shadows. Very dramatic, very effective. Sometimes you have to manipulate the light in your surroundings to achieve this. You can even frame your subjects using body parts. It's a really famous photograph right there. Who knew? Even animals can be used to frame. So if you want to fly to Africa and frame giraffes, that would be fine. Okay, so after all of this, let's summarize what's most important to really know about the compositional technique of framing in photography. The number one reason is to draw attention to the main subject. Okay, framing helps to create the context for the photo. It supports compositional depth, but really the main focus and purpose of framing is to attract the viewer's eye to the main subject. And secondly, framing is really achieved in two ways. Number one, by shooting through something. Number two, placing your subject inside of something. And finally, we can use the many tools at our disposal on our photo shoot, if available, to creatively frame our subjects, such as architecture, environmental elements, shapes, light and shadows, body parts, animals, and really, lastly, whatever we can gather from our surroundings. So, good luck in your photo shoots. See how you can creatively use framing. And, guys, don't forget to take your guided notes and save those notes and add those to your binder. Thank you.